I'm Joyashree Roy, a member of the fifth Prince Sultan bin Aziz Award for Water in 2012 laureate team. Currently, I'm Bangabandhu Chair Professor at the Asian Institute of Technology, Thailand, and also I'm a Professor of Economics at Jadavpur University in India. I really thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts and my work with the August audience. The presentation which I'm going to speak on is about water or health, where to put the money. Uh, I always feel that, this is going to be the decisive decade, 2021 to 2030, because fortunately or unfortunately, we are starting this decade with handsome financial resources on the table of the decision makers and investors, a minimum of 12 to 14 trillion COVID recovery package money. With the tagline attached, though, that Build Back Better, and also with a constant reminder from the scientific community of the 2030 targets under the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals. What do we know about the water and health nexus from scientific evidence and ground reality? I'm just giving you some facts. There are much more which we can go on adding, but these are from the WHO website, World Health Organization's website. It's globally 15% of patients in any hospital develop an infection during a hospital stay because of lack of water infrastructure. 2,195 children die of common diarrhea every day, 365 days round the year. Cancer claims more than 26,000 lives every day. And 200 million people drink arsenic-laced water in the absence of access to safe drinking water and lives with the highest possible risk of getting cancer. Some more facts from Indian continent, where what we have done is using the official statistics, we tried to map the different states in India, where we are trying to show that what is the population coverage through the safe drinking water. The negative, the light blue, means that these states have access to water less than the India average. And the dark blue ones are having access with more than India average. And in the right-hand side, we are showing the states with incidence of diarrhea and the number of patients per thousand population. From that, the negative shows those who are having less than, the incidence of the diarrhea less than the India average, and rest are having the diarrhea incidence above India average. So if you map them together, if you superimpose, you can see that the areas with less access to safe drinking water are the areas who are the more sufferers of diarrhea. Another fact, ground reality, when we measured from the Kolkata Municipal Corporation, the mega city in India, where we measured the pipe to water supply of the municipality throughout the year in different seasons. We actually got this data for 365 days and tried to know what is the percentage of confluent in the water samples collected from the piped water supplied. We see that during the summer months, the confluent increases, which means the water gets contaminated, even if it is going through the piped water system to the households. So which simply means with climate variability going more towards warming, this water quality impact in the cities of the mega cities are going to be of crossing the danger limit. So another aspect which we cannot deny in any city is the water and the injustice around water. This is again from the same city of Kolkata in India, where we tried to see that how many households are having access to the piped water supply. We see that high income group has and the middle income group and the have the higher share of the piped water supply. But if we look into the below poverty line population, they do not have even a single water connection in their homes. And if we look into the disease burden, then we see that the, the marginally poor and the below poverty line people have the highest incidence of total waterborne diseases in their households. So, waterborne disease, so a health problem arising from multiple waterborne disease is exclusively related to the safe drinking water access. And also we looked into how people use for purification of their water. We can see in the high income group, there is more purification, that is they boil the water or they filter the water, which means that there is a high energy water nexus and health impact compared to the BPL households where there is almost no purification method applied, and so the incidence of diseases are also more. So this is, I'm talking about the mega city, right? So in the urban areas, this is the injustice and the health disease burden that we are living with just because there is not access to safe drinking water. So, but if we did the study with the households and we tried to see that how people react. So, do the poor people really aspire for good quality water? We did a willingness to pay survey and we found that poorer the people with less access, they're ready to pay even more for better quality of water, but then high income group who has already better access, their willingness to pay is less. So we can also see how this social power structure also impacts their willingness to pay, given that who has better access in the whole system. And if we look into the unaccounted for water, very interestingly, we will see that for drinking water, we all know that the human body needs a particular level of consumption, and that is almost the same in the below poverty line and the high income group. But look at the other end users, it's more than double. And so this is only which I'm just showing the unaccounted for water, right? So this is something which we need to understand, that unaccounted for water is higher with the high income groups. So if we want to know for this injustice and wastage of water, how much the society is bearing the cost, because wastage means we have spent money and also energy or electricity for water treatment. And so how much of those are getting wasted? So we are putting these in terms of Indian rupees. And so we can show that per day, there is loss of 800,000 Indian rupees because of the wastage of water in the treated water supply system. And electricity lost is again another 100,000 units because of the electricity that has been gone in for water treatment and that is getting wasted. So these are the costs the society is paying. So just keep these in mind, and then I'm trying to show you a little more information that this is about. We wrote 2 books about the arsenic contamination and what it implies for the people in the same state of West Bengal, where Calcutta is a city. So it is from the same socio-economic background which I'm trying to bring in. And this is the work, I mean, a previous work on this was actually acknowledged by Prince Sultan bin Aziz Award. So we carried forward the work after the award, because that was an encouragement for us. And then we could find that actually people are suffering from different kind of skin diseases, and that finally leads to loss of their amputation of their hands or legs, and then this has a huge health cost on them. So we wanted to know just a very simple exercise of willingness to pay, and then we could see that the cost of cure, if you want to cure them by medical treatment, it will be costing more than almost 4 times than what it costs for preventing the disease by providing access to safe, arsenic-safe drinking water. So it is clearly that preventive cost is much less than the cost of cure. So I started with the question where to put the money for social benefit. Who could have taught us much better, if not COVID-19, that prevention is better than the cure? Because direct cost to an individual, if I just bring in again from the same city, what is the cost of medical bill if someone got infected during this past 1 year, then it costs at least 100,000 Indian rupees in 2 weeks. And what is the preventive measure? We all can calculate, right? And so this also shows that how prevention is much better than cure. So the question comes, so how to build back better? So do we invest more on health sector, or do we invest more on the water sector? It simply means that we have traversed a long way and now come to a point on the road where we need to decide which of the two entry points we need to take. We all try to make informed decisions, especially when it involves well-being of 7 billion people. So best decision is definitely least costly solution, economically, socially, and environmentally. We have already seen some statistics. I will just give you this flow chart to show that if we look into the climate variability and how it is going to impact the temperature, humidity, and extreme events, then maybe we can control the climate change and prevent it, and prevent its impact on heat stress and impact on vector and waterborne diseases and health damage. Or we allow all this to continue, and then health damage happens, people get sick, and then we try to do the medical expenditure and then try to see that how that loss of benefit can be managed by treating the sickness. But we know that we have already shown that how prevention is less costly than the cure. Even in case of climate change, we have seen that prevention is less costly than cure, and prevention has more co-benefits in terms of multiple other benefits, just not the health damage benefit. So question comes, to build back better, what we should avoid. We should avoid some policies which are creating distortions in the societal system and which leads to wrong incentive. Say, for example, if you have some kind of incentive where it is not the volumetric charge for water, but it's a flat rate, then there is no incentive for waste reduction. And we have seen that how wastage of water leads to more cost or burden on the society. Similarly, that avoids the efficiency rule also. So the least cost option can never be achieved. And we have seen how distributive justice is violated. And so another question comes. So we know that for water, who collects water in the rural areas? We know it's the women, it's the girls who are engaged in that. In one sense, this gives them some kind of ownership of caring for their family and home, and makes their position in the home stronger and empowers them because of this activity. But I'm not saying that this burdensome work really need to continue with them. But what it really means is that the rural water supply systems are changing, and promising sustainable systems are coming so that it's less labor time needed. But the question is this gender inclusive? Just look at this. This has been removing all the women from the ownership of the water. So this is something which we need to understand, that how women empowerment can go hand in hand when we build the sustainable solutions. So the question comes, how to develop? So there is need for a paradigm shift, we know, through genuine investment. When we talk of genuine investment, we want to say that it needs to take care of an investment which takes care of societal justice, the economic justice, and the environmental justice. And from that point of view, I'm just trying to show you that if we just follow the sustainable development goals, which are set for and which has been agreed upon politically by all the countries, by the decision makers, if we follow the Sustainable Development Goal 6, which is on water, but my submission is that our research shows it just not when making an investment decision, we need not only focus on SDG 6, but we need to focus on few other SDGs, which is part of the SDG 2, which is the target number 2.4, like this 15.1, 15.2, 15.8, and we can go on. And what it simply says is that all these are showing how to take preventive measure in the water sector to make it preventive care rather than a cure-based economic investment decision. Because we have already seen that if we invest in water, it is less burdensome on the society. And if we save money socially, then we can invest it in another, because there is always scarcity of financial resources. So making the best possible decision is the best. So I always say that we need to take SDG 6 plus approach in thinking of the investment in water sector during the COVID recovery period. And so what we need is, when I started with that, we are sitting with the money and how to build back better. My answer will be that we need to prioritize water for preventive action sector rather than the cure-based health sector investment. And that prioritization will always give us a better health outcome, and we can produce a better human health just by spending on preventive action in the water sector. And we have seen that cure action by investing in pharmaceutical industry and hospitals does not lead to cost-effective solution and justice in the society. So what we did is we just made some rough calculations, and which shows that only if we spend 3.5 trillion USD targeted towards 50% of the global population aspiring for dignified living with basic services, we can create no less than 200 million new jobs in this decade, and we can avoid any future pandemic with multi-layered damage whose cost is well above 3.5 trillion in a global economy of today means 2019 and 2020, when the value of the global economy was 86 trillion US dollar. And if we compare this with our COVID-19 the recovery fund, then it is 12 to 14 million, and we need just 3 million to solve the problem once for all for the whole global population, so that everybody can have a better health through investment in water sector. So if we are asking that, is COVID-19 on a collision course with 2030 Sustainable Development Goal utopia? Yes, 50% of the world population who lives in South Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and East Asia, majority do not have access to safe drinking water, let alone 24/7 water service flow. So COVID-19 is indeed in a collision course with utopia, but it is upon us to not to make it so. And we need a collective action. We need both blue and green economy to thrive for our survival. You can visit our space, changeframing.space, where we have more information. Thank you very much.